Problems and proposed reform of the law of provocation and diminished responsibility. Where do the problems of provocation and diminished responsibility come from? The Homicide Act 1957, Section 3 and 2 on diminished responsibility and provocation. So what is provocation? It is an action or speech that provokes someone deliberately. So what were the problems of Section 3 on provocation? Lack of judicial control. The jury decides the outcome of the case, meaning the judge doesn't have much power. Loss of self-control. It is difficult to establish whether the defendant experienced loss of self-control. For example, slow burn. The reasonable man requirements. To what extent should a defendant's own characteristics be taken into account when judging how a reasonable man would respond to provocation? What did the Law Commission recommend, and for what reasons would you be able to get convicted of second-degree murder if it would have otherwise been first-degree murder? If the defendant acted in response to gross provocation, fear of serious violence towards the defendant, or a combination of both, or if a person of the defendant's age and of ordinary temperament would have reacted in the same or similar way. So is it possible for provocation not to be used as a defense for murder? Yes, if the provocation was incited by the defendant for the purpose of providing an excuse to use violence, or the defendant acted in a considered desire to revenge. Also, the judge should not leave the defense to the jury unless there is evidence which a reasonable jury can conclude that it might apply. An example of where provocation can be seen is in the case of Duffy. An abused wife. Over many years of suffering. Takes a final step to give her husband what he deserves. So as he was sleeping, she planned to kill him. The court decided that her action was a result of slow burn. What is diminished responsibility? The defense which states that someone is not mentally well enough to be totally responsible for murder. So what were the problems on Section 2 on diminished responsibility? Problems with the definition. The definition says nothing about what is involved in a substantial impairment of mental responsibility, so it is hard to identify what has an impact on their culpability for intentional killing and whether it produces the offender's culpability. Age concern. Aged under 18 offenders who kill due to the difficulty of distinguishing between the effects of mental abnormality and straightforward developmental immaturity. Lack of information in the definition. Definition has not included whether the evidence from the medical experts are required, although the evidence is crucial to legal viability of any claim of diminished responsibility. Establishing abnormality of the mind. It's hard to say what could be actual causes of an abnormality of the mind which could be stimulated. In any event, the stimulated permissible causes never had an agreed psychiatric meaning. What did the Law Commission recommend? They recommend that the definition should be modernized so it is both clearer and better able to accommodate developments. They recommend adoption of the following definition. A person would otherwise be guilty of first-degree murder is guilty of second-degree murder if, at the time they played their part in the killing, their capacity to understand the nature of his or her conduct, form a rational judgment, or control his or herself was substantially impaired by an abnormality of the mind recognized by medics and developmental immaturity in defendants under 18 or both. Lastly, the abnormality, the developmental immaturity, or combination of both, provides an explanation for the defendant's conduct in carrying out or taking part in the killing. A case of diminished responsibility is the case of Woods. The appellant was a heavy alcoholic who had become friends with other alcoholics. After a heavy night of drinking, he had woken up to find the deceased attempting oral sex on him. This led to the appellant attacking the deceased, which resulted in murder. As he was under the influence of alcohol, he had a temporary abnormality of the mind. Therefore, the murder convictions were quashed.